Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, today we are discussing the number one reason to be a private lender. Real quick before we get started here, in case you are interested in working directly with us, we have a few different options. The best place to find out about this is to speak with our program director, Dave Bauer. Just go to hardmoneybusiness.com/schedule, and you'll be able to pick a time, speak to Dave. He'll run you through all the options. Okay. All right. Number one reason to be a private lender. And there are a few reasons. We're going to discuss all the reasons, and we're going to start with the number one. The number one reason to be a private lender, and it always has been, is to lend your own money to earn double-digit rates of return. That's how this industry started, not only in real estate, but other kinds of what they call, hard asset lending. In case anyone doesn't know, that's where the term hard money lending came from, is lending against a hard asset, some kind of collateral that you can use to collect the money that's owed to you, as opposed to like an unsecured loan and all that stuff, right? So I think that there are a few other important benefits to being a private lender, even if you don't have your own funds. We didn't start with our own funds. We were in our 20s. It was all investor capital. We grew our capital base of our own over the years. We're going to go into a few of these things, but one story that we like to bring up, you might have heard it before, is after we were in business for a few years and we were doing pretty well. We had grown the company a bit. We were taking home some good money as the owners. We had a couple employees. In one January, around this time, we were sending out 1099 INTs to our capital investors. And one of our larger investors took home about 20 or 30 grand more than we did, each of us. And he didn't have to do any work. He didn't do anything besides, approve the deals and send over the money. We did all the work, and his couple $1 million had more earning power than our entire year of work. And that is something that we're going to talk about the industry as a whole, but that's the main point that we want to get across, is the whole be the bank. That the hashtag, the movement, the stuff that people are talking about, that's a real thing. That's kind of the point here.
Yeah. And keep in mind, the reality of this business in general is chances are, unless you're completely self-funded and you never need to raise additional capital, like most hard money lenders and private lenders are, raising capital, and you can probably tell real time, it's definitely not like how much money am I giving up by using other people's capital, but the more you're putting up yourself, you can tell the return. And what we've come to the conclusion with after lending on, thousands of deals over the years is it ends up being about a 50-50 split with your capital investor. So if you just do the math and you're lending out at 13 and 3 and your capital investor is getting 10%, in about a 6-month time period, if that's the average life expectancy of your loan, in about 6 months, it ends up that, you're making about 6% and they're making about, or about 5 or 6%, and they're making about 5 or 6%, right? Because do the math. If it's 10% annualized, they're making, 5% in a 6 months, time period. And if you're charging 3 points, plus you're making a 3% servicing spread, so that's 3% annualized, 1.5% over a 6-month period. So that's 4.5%, plus some miscellaneous junk fees. So it ends up being kind of the same amount. And I think that's a fair split. I think if you're out there and you're raising capital and you're using other people's money to fund these particular deals or to invest in these deals, and they're taking on, even though we believe that these things are as, we try to structure our loans to make them as risk-free as possible. There's still obviously risk, and there's real capital that, is on the hook on some of these deals. So it's one of those things that, we feel like that's a fair arrangement. You do all the work, somebody puts up all the capital, you do a 50-50 split, right? That being said, think about it the other way. If it's all your own money, you're doing the same amount of work and you're making twice as much money, or you're doing half as many deals and you're still making the same amount of money. There's two ways to look at that. And that's kind of where the magic is. And too many lenders that we talk to all over the place aren't setting these businesses up for them to be a capital investor in these transactions. I'm not saying that they're not putting their money into deals, but I think a lot of them are putting money into the deals because they think they need to put money into deals in order to get capital investors involved. And that's just the capital they have available. But the goal of this is to use this as an investment vehicle. It's an investment vehicle first and foremost, and it's important. And I get it. Like, if you're not at a point where you want to use all your capital to invest into deals, but like, we like Chris started with, we started with very little of our own, and we realized that our investors were making a lot more money doing a lot less work. It's like, we need to be the ones putting in the capital. And to this day, 18 years later, every month we put more money into our lender account. And when I say lender account, we put more money into deals. So we're in, a wide variety of lots and lots of loans that we're doing on a regular basis. And it's not just because we believe in the product and we believe in, you should always invest in something that you believe in. This is our investment vehicle. Like, this is where we invest our capital. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't diversify into other asset classes, but like, we're getting, the 10 to, technically 13% return if we're not, charging a servicing fee on ourselves. Maybe it's higher if there's default interest as well, but like, we're getting that return with our own personal capital. And that's the thing. We're creating this investment vehicle that many, many, many businesses just do not have. You don't have a business plus as an investment vehicle as well. Like, there's two very, very powerful things going on inside this operation.
For sure. And let's talk about that investment vehicle real quick. So one thing that I was thinking about recently, even before we started talking about the topic of this podcast, is risk-adjusted return. And what that means is the rate of return that you're getting and how much risk are you taking. And this model is fantastic when you approach it from that metric there, risk-adjusted, because the first mortgage lender should be taking the least amount of risk in the transaction. Out of the people in an investment real estate transaction, you have the first, you might even have a second, and some of this applies more so to commercial than residential, but still, same structure. There could be a second lender, or mezzanine debt, as they call it. There could be equity investors, right? People who are putting up money to be a part owner in a deal. And then there's the sponsor, the operator, the borrower, depending on who you are in the transaction. You might use a different term. All of those people are going to be taking more risk than the first mortgage lender in any deal. And that's something, if you're taking all the risk and you're the first mortgage lender and you're the only person with capital and risk in the deal, you're doing it wrong. That's kind of a topic for another day that we covered a lot, but that's definitely the case. So if you are at the right kind of loan to value and lending to the right person, say you're a solo operator, and so you get all of the points in interest rate return. You get 3 points, maybe 12.99%. So you're talking about 16% annual. That is a very, very good return for something that should have a relatively low amount of risk, right? 16% first mortgage. That's a great deal. There are a lot of equity investors out there who are looking for a 12, 14, 16% return on an equity deal, which is inherently has more risk than the first mortgage lender. So, and of course, there is a taxation. That's one of the downfalls of this investment vehicle, this type of lending, and that's the case. But still, risk adjusted, this is a fantastic investment vehicle. And I know that a good portion of the industry has gotten away from the investment vehicle part of this in the past, 6-7 years, when institutional money came in, and a lot of people came into the space because of that capital being there. And then they just treat this business like the mortgage industry, where you're lending some institutions money according to their guidelines, you make a little commission, and on you go. And that's okay too. That's okay. But that's not the number one reason to be in the business.
Yeah, I mean, the business, and yeah, we talked about how it started, obviously, way back in time, but like, think about the first time you ever heard about a private lender, a hard money lender. It probably was like right when you got into real estate in general. Pre 10 years ago, the folks that were lending out money were, older attorneys and folks that understood real estate, and they had money that they wanted to deploy. They weren't like creating operations where they're going out and pulling capital together or raising money and leveraging it with funds. They were doing it with their own money, because they realize
Yep.
the value of, hey, I can get a better return and have a safer, more predictable investment at a higher return than putting my money in a stock market. Like, they were creating their own investment vehicle. And that's what this is. It's an investment vehicle that you're creating to deploy your own capital in, and hopefully friends and family and, trusted colleagues as well into this. And again, like Chris said, too many people are getting around that. Too many lenders I talk to, like, that conversation doesn't even really come up. It's like, hey, how can I leverage my own funds, or how can I do this, or when I'm putting my own money into deals, blah 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 blah. Like, it's all like business oriented type of stuff, not necessarily investment vehicle types of stuff. And fortunately, 2 years after we were in this business, we had that aha moment of like, wow, this is an investment vehicle, not just a mortgage broker operation or funding deal operation. And one thing I've shared before, up until about 4 years ago, when we had some water damage in our office and it got ripped down, but I had a big sign above my wall, and it was a quote from Warren Buffett. And to this day, I cannot find that freaking quote, and I've searched for it and I can't find it, because I wish I had it again, because I would recreate it. But in essence, it said, there's not many business ventures that spit out cash that you can reinvest back into that business that will, in essence, spit out double-digit rates of return over and over and over, to a point where you can almost put unlimited funds in it. And if you do come across that business model, go all in on it and do whatever you can to keep redeploying your capital, because they're hard to come by and they're great business ventures. And that's what, we all have here as hard money lending operations. So I definitely encourage you, even if it's just a small amount of money to start with, if you're just starting out, make sure you're putting money into loans, right? Put money into loans, and then monthly, quarterly, yearly, reinvest profits and put them back into loans. Because we started this conversation off that if you're the actual lender on these deals, you're making twice as much money on every one of them. And not everyone's fortunate enough to be able to be self-funded. I mean, we're not obviously self-funded for our entire operations. Most folks aren't. But, and I'm not saying take all your capital and put it into this operation, but this is an investment vehicle and treat it like one.
And one quick word of caution before we hop here is, I follow a lot of private lending type stuff on social media, right? Like, this is our business. I want to see what people out there are talking about. And in some of these groups, I see people having conversations that make me a little worried for them. There are people who are very well qualified to do loans on their own. They know how to document it. They know how to underwrite. They know insurance and all the boxes to check. And there are a lot of people who don't. And they're having conversations about, oh yeah, I heard, I got this deal, and it's going to be on a multifamily property. They need a second. I'm going to be behind, I'm putting up, $200K behind $1 million first, and blah, blah, blah. And I can get a 17% rate of return. That seems like a good deal, doesn't it? And that's just one example of stuff I see out there from people who are not pros in this business. They have some money. They want to invest it for a double-digit rate of return, and that is absolutely great. But if you don't know how to properly do loans, point being, that example I just gave is an awful deal. It's a terrible loan. You should never do that, anything like that. And I see people discussing the ins and outs of non-deals. These aren't deals. These aren't something that a pro lender would do. And they're talking about underwriting them and this, and I'm like, man, you guys got to be careful. I don't want people out there losing money. It's great to get, like, if you aren't qualified to underwrite and package and manage a loan like a professional, hook up with a company that does that and make your 9, 10, 11% rate of return and have it be completely passive. Because you don't want to get in this and get lured in by good rates of return and do dumb deals that are going to lose you money. So I just want to throw in that disclaimer, that warning. Be careful out there. If you aren't a professional at this, hook up with a company that is. Yeah. So like we started with, if you are a pro lender and want to step up your game, grow your company, do things safer, any of the above, check out hardmoneybusiness.com/schedule. Talk to Dave Bauer, our program director. We hope to work with you, and we'll see everyone next time here on the Private Lenders Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.